Monique Ramos on behalf of Superintendent Torlakson. So the superintendent does not support the governor's proposal. The superintendent believes it is time for another school facilities bond. Assemblymember Buchanan is authoring AB 2235, as the analysis points out, which does a couple things. It would create a bond for the 2014 ballot and would make major reforms within the current program, which is one of the recommendations that the governor's office would like to see, is reforms and streamlining. The superintendent agrees that it's time to streamline the program, but feels it is critical we start a new bond and that we start that investment this year. Just for a little bit of context, 71% of our schools are over 25 years old, 30% are greater than 50 years old, and 10% are at least 70 years old. We feel it's necessary for the state to commit to its facilities program again. On the second proposal, the superintendent does support the emergency repair program. He views this as basically an obligation under a lawsuit settlement, and that we should continue to fund the program we have.
Questions from the committee? Mr. Mr. Jabami.
My district's in the heart of the San Fernando Valley, so we're always very worried about earthquakes. I noticed that in the seismic mitigation program, there's quite a bit of authority still left and funding available. Why is this so? Why haven't we been more successful in getting this out to school districts to have projects going forward that would also not only benefit those schools, make them safer for our students, but also help with facilities that desperately need to be seismically upgraded?
So I would say that the seismic barriers they vary by district. Everybody has identified targets, but some of the critiques that we've had is that eligibility has been an issue, and also lack of upfront funding. And over the course of since the program was started, since 2007, the State Allocation Board has made several attempts to be able to work with school districts in expanding the type of buildings of which will qualify, and then also removing a ground shaking factor that was previously implemented when the program first started, and then providing LEA's grants to be able to cover upfront costs. But despite these efforts, the program continues to be undersubscribed. So,
do you think the barriers are just too strict? Do you think this isn't something that we should be looking at to make sure that we're maybe lowering the threshold so we can get more of this money out to school districts that will end up repairing buildings that maybe now aren't considered to meet these guidelines?
Ian Johnson, Department of Finance. I think what the administration's view is that this program's been around for 8 years. There's been a lot of discussion about how to expand eligibility for the program and increase participation. The State Allocation Board has talked about this program in great length. They've gone as far as to create a seismic commission to talk only about expanding eligibility for this program. Virtually all of the eligibility requirements in terms of ground shaking intensity and things that Missy Day mentioned have already been loosened to the largest extent they can, and yet there continues to not be participation in the program. So from our perspective, the program has run its course, and while seismic is certainly an important issue for facilities, the administration's proposal would shift that authority to the core program so that we can actually get projects started and make sort of better and quicker use of the limited remaining bond authority that's remaining in the current program.
How much is left in the current program, do you know?
Overall, or just for seismic?
Seismic.
For seismic, I believe it's $165 million roughly. I can get you an exact number, but it's 100. I'm sorry, 151.
And just to the Department of Education on this, do you see this as somewhat of a failure out of your department to try to do more outreach or to do more? To work with local school districts to make them aware of the available funds for these projects?
No, we do not see that. This money is distributed by the State Allocation Board and by the Office of Public School Construction. So the department's role in the school construction process is essentially school districts provide their site levels, the sites they're planning to purchase under new construction to us, and we approve those or make recommendations, essentially. That's our role, essentially, through this process. The superintendent himself has been a proponent of the program as a role on the State Allocation Board, but we don't directly administer these dollars.
Fair enough. Thank you.
If I could add some information to The program isn't, there have been challenges in terms of funding the program, but there are applications currently at the Division of the State Architect, which districts have to submit to. And there's currently 66 applications there for a total of $104 million. So there is demand for this program. There's just been a lot of challenges in terms of...
I've heard that many times. DSA takes an extremely long time to approve projects across the board. I mean, it just, and you just...
And that's
that.
part of our recommendation, just to allow a little more time so that maybe some of these projects could be funded.
So there are current projects now that would be for seismic repairs that are being held up or waiting for this department to approve. But in the meantime, we might shift that money away from that, and those projects might be approved, but then the funding's gone. Would that be correct?
I think that we would note that it is unknown what the status is of all of the applications that are at the Division of State Architect. It's possible that a lot of those applications have been there for 5 years. There are a number of phases that Division of State Architect runs projects through. There are 4 phases. And there is only 7 applications that are in phase 4 that are actually teed up. They've received all of their approvals from both the Office of Public School Construction and the Division of State Architect and are just waiting for that final step by the architect to approve the projects. The other, close to $95 million worth of applications are somewhere in that process. But again, it's uncertain if those are still viable projects, if the districts are sort of, aggressively trying to make their way through that process. There is a lot of sort of back and forth with districts when they're going through the Division of State Architect process.
Do you know what the average length of time is for those projects to go through?
It can vary depending on the scope of the project, but it can be anywhere from a year to 3 years in terms of getting through the DSA
Sounds
process.
like more than that. If you said you want to say something.
So it varies. The phases can vary. So you can go from 3 to 4 steps depending on what type of project you want to do. If you want to do a replacement project, the average length of a project there is about 7 months. If you want to do a rehabilitation project, it can range up to a year and a couple of months. That's for the successful applications that have gone through, according to DSA.
It just seems like the burden, though, has been put on these schools to come up with the plans and proposals and submit them. They've been submitted. Whether or not they're all worthy or not, some obviously are worthy. Some have gone farther down the process than others. But it seems like to move this money out of that fund completely and then have these projects still there, and then some get approved or some deemed as worthy, then there's no funding left. What does that say about, the process?
And are you going to answer that, anybody? Or was that rhetorical? Or
Somewhat rhetorical, but...
On the DSA issue, why doesn't DSA work with the school as they're submitting their project so they don't have to wait a year? They should work hand in hand as they're submitting their project, making sure they go by the right guidelines. And I assume they've been doing this for years, and it shouldn't be that much guesswork when they get done there. That okay, we follow all the guidelines, check, done. It seems like they're going through quite a long process that they should already work with going forward when they're designing it. Wouldn't that make sense, Mr. LAO?
Well, I think, like the administration was saying, if there's going to be a new school facilities program, we're all looking for opportunities to streamline and make it work more efficiently than the current program, yes.
Can I ask on a separate issue, charter schools? Why are we excluding charter schools?
So charter schools work differently than other specialized programs within the current program. The money, I know that it appears like that there's remaining bond authority, but really that bond authority was set aside for projects that already had preliminary apportionments.
You're talking about the 95 million here?
Yeah.
So it's actually zero?
No, well, how it's been identified as being available. However, we knew back in July that the money that the projects didn't end up materializing and didn't move forward, that money was going to be identified to go for a new filing round. And knowing that charters have specific issues as far as financing facilities, they can't do local bonds. They have to raise that local match on their own or go through loans. We didn't include that in the proposal. We recognize that given those challenges that this money set aside for charters would be something that would be moving forward in the next filing round. And currently, OPSC has over $160 million worth of applications for the remaining $85 million worth of authority.
To be honest, I didn't follow all that. So you don't think that charter schools need it because what's in line is sufficiently funded?
No. Well, okay. We didn't identify that amount because we knew that there was going to be a new filing round opening soon, and historically, the charter rounds have always been oversubscribed, as it is right now. So there's a filing round already open that opened at the beginning of the month. It's going to end on May 31st, and as of right now, or as of April 16th, they already have $162 million worth of applications for $85 million worth of projects.
And that seems sufficient?
That's what's left in the remaining charter program for their facilities.
Okay. In other words, the charter program is oversubscribed. While at the time that we were building the governor's budget, there was about $90 million in, technically unencumbered funds. In November of 2013, the State Allocation Board publicly voted to open up a new filing round for a competitive filing round for charter for that remaining bond authority. And so that filing round opened in April 1st, and it was basically the State Allocation Board saying, we have $85 million of remaining bond authority for charter projects. To date, they've received over $160 million worth of applications. That number will continue to grow until the filing round closes at the end of May of this year. And so we don't view this in the same way that we view the other specialized program.
Where's that money come in later then, once they close the filing period and they see all this? Where's that? Say there's $200 million that has been filed. Where does that money come from then to fund?
So the $200 million, let's assume it's $200 million.
Right.
That would represent the dollars worth of applications that are applying for this $85 million pot. So what the Office of Public School Construction will then do is rank all of the applications that they've received. They have a very specific criteria of evaluating which charter schools will get the funding. And so they will basically be able to meet $85 million of that, in our example, $200 million worth of need.
I got you. One last point, if I can ask. The LAO suggested 6 year look at update, I guess, the facilities requests, maybe go back 6 years for the regular schools. And should they update those, or you asked or suggested maybe they do a quick update as opposed to going back 6 years and looking at those. Does that make sense to you? And actually, I assume, don't they just update their requests as they need to, or why would they keep a request on there that they don't need now?
Essentially what happened is districts applied for the emergency repair program in 2008, and there were enough applications to use up all of the money that was supposed to be available, but the state hasn't funded the program in 6 years. So if money is available now 6 years later, you're paying for the applications submitted 6 years ago. And we believe that since they're emergency repair projects, districts likely already have done the projects in the past 6 years.
So two things on that. First, when the program was originally created in 2005 as a result of the Williams settlement, it started as purely a reimbursement program. It only changed to being a grant program in, I think, around 2007. So the original intent of this program was that it would be a reimbursement program to reimburse districts that are in some of the lowest performing districts, to reimburse them for going ahead and addressing their what could be serious facilities shortcomings. And so we've already so on the second point of whether it's
already done that is his point.
And I think we would say that the original intent of the program was to reimburse districts that have already made repairs. It was only in 2007 when it didn't appear as though there were potentially enough applications coming in to be able to provide the entire $800 million, which the settlement is based on, that it was switched to both a grant and a reimbursement-based program. But so to sort of close the issue on that, I think from our perspective, it was created to be a reimbursement program, and so we don't see reimbursing projects as a reason to not provide funding for this state obligation. And then in terms of opening up a new filing round to potentially sort of refresh the list, we think that's unnecessary. It will cut against the time. It will increase the time that it will take to get this money out to these districts. Again, these are some of the lowest performing districts. Another point of the ERP program when it was created was that it would provide funds for districts to address maintenance issues outside of the regular sort of ongoing operations budgets.
So do you think that they're that far behind in reimbursing, that something was done 4 or 5 years ago and they haven't been reimbursed for it?
We know they haven't been reimbursed. So our perspective was, I think, which is the governor's proposal, is let's reimburse these folks for projects done 6 years ago. However, I was saying there's other approaches you could take. If you are concerned about fixing facilities that are broken today, for using money that you have today to fix facilities where kids today might be in a classroom with a broken heating or air conditioning system, the governor's proposal doesn't necessarily do that because you're reimbursing for something that happened 6 years ago.
Well, then that would free up money then for them to do that at the local level then.
For that particular district, but we don't know where the need is today because it's been 6 years. We don't even know if the same schools are the low-performing schools today that they were 6 years ago. So the information is just out of date, essentially.
Okay, thanks.
Public comments.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe Dixon, I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Facilities with Santa Ana Unified School District and Chair of Coalition for Adequate School Housing. First, on the emergency repair program, we took money out of capital facility funds to take care of our emergency repairs, which then took away from our ability to do other projects that we told the community we were going to do, such as one of the biggest things we're doing now is replacing portables with 2-story classrooms. There's schools we couldn't do that at because the state didn't fund ERP, and that's the reimbursement part. And we spent a lot of money and a lot of time putting those applications in. It wasn't just filling out a piece of paper. There's engineering, there's architect work. And every year, I believe every year since 2008, the governor, the administration has put money into ERP in the January budget, and then it gets taken out. So every year we have hope, and every year it gets taken away. That's ERP. So I would support the administration's position on that. Switching or transferring the funds to new construction and modernization, we were talking about seismic. Seismic has changed a couple of times since Prop 1D, but it takes two turns at trying to get that into DSA. We were talking about DSA. The first thing you have to do is get an engineer to a school to determine if it even qualifies under seismic. If it and that goes to DSA. DSA then reviews that and says, oh yes, it qualifies. So after that, then you have to hire an architect and an engineer and submit plans to DSA. So now you're going through a state agency twice. There's another issue with seismic as well, as I see, and that's interim housing. If you close a school for 2 years, where do you put the kids, and how do you pay for that? That's a big issue. So seismic, there's a lot of issues with it, but districts are going after it, and any district that has spent that much time and money shouldn't be penalized and have that money taken away. I'd like to real quick go through overcrowding relief grant. It says there's $16 million left. Santa Ana put in an application in the last funding round. There wasn't money available. It was oversubscribed. I'm kind of surprised to see 16, but we spent a lot of time and money there to put an application in. Career Tech as well, there's applications for that. Seismic we talked about. And then HPI, I believe the allocation board talked about taking that money right now, or previously it was restricted to new construction. There's no new construction money, so you couldn't use it. But if we could use it for overcrowding relief grant, Career Tech projects, that money would fly out the door too. So we don't believe, and I don't believe transferring that money would be a good idea. Okay. Thank you.
Eric Baca with the Los Angeles Unified School District. I actually like going after Joe because he pretty much covers everything for me. I just want to make a couple quick points. The transfer of the fund, the district doesn't have a position on the transfer. We believe that there is a significant need and that the amount of the transfer will be far less than what's already in the budget proposal. I think you heard some of that in the testimony today, that they'll be looking at how much is available after that point in time. That being said, in hearing the LAO's recommendation about delaying that transfer, I think that is a very smart and prudent move, considering there are still a number of projects still at the DSA that could be encumbered under this program. And I think that makes a lot of sense, considering the timeline it takes to get projects out of DSA. One of the other considerations, and we appreciate this item being held over, that maybe to think about, is that some of the program concepts, I don't know how the dollars line up in terms of the timing, if there's already so many projects in modernization and new construction that'll eat up any available money that will be transferred. But just something to consider is the opportunity to look at those existing programs like Seismic, like ORG, the items that are being transferred, and allowing the concepts of those programs to also transfer, meaning that those programs don't automatically die because of dollar transfers, but if you have a project that's eligible under those old programs that are being transferred, you should be eligible to apply for those fundings, though it's now going to be called new construction or now it's going to be called modernization. Just something to consider there. With respect to the ERP, I think Mr. Dixon said everything that I wanted to comment on. You know, for us, it's really, you know, these are projects that, for us, we front-loaded these dollars with the idea that they were being reimbursed. There's no fault to the district that the state wasn't able to pay that settlement agreement. We've gone through, we did everything we were supposed to do. We met all the requirements and that were required of us at that point in time. It seems unfair to us that the rules now all of a sudden change because we want to reevaluate because of the financial crisis. I think that basically is a hit on school districts and simply penalizes them unfairly. So we would simply ask that we just approve the governor's proposal, pay these projects that have been reimbursed. And for a district like mine, we've deferred a lot of local projects that needed to be done because of that. And so what we'd hope to do is be able to get back to those projects that were a high priority for us by using these dollars to get those projects up and going again. So we think there is a strong facility need that will be addressed. And the last one, I think it was said earlier, is that a lot of this can be alleviated by the support of another statewide bond. We think that will address a lot of these concerns and issues, and so we're very supportive of a 2014 school construction bond. Thank you very much.
Catherine Williams with the ACLU of California. It'll come as no surprise that we're very supportive of the governor's proposal to fully fund ERP over the next 2 years. We're provided a handout that, I apologize, didn't get to you sooner, just finalized it yesterday. But, you know, I believe that honoring the commitment to fully fund ERP and continuing to have a commitment to facilities on an ongoing basis are consistent. You know, as you've heard from the districts, they've, you know, as they've languished in the funding queue, they've diverted projects that might now today be emergencies, and you know, it really is important that we honor that commitment, and in doing so we have an outstanding and continuing commitment to funding current projects. So we again really strongly support the governor's proposal, and I hope to answer any questions that might come out of the handout we provided. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Tom Duffy for the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. Just one item. I appreciate your staff comments that issues addressing school facilities could be resolved with the passage of AB 2235, Ms. Buchanan's and Mr. Hagman's bond measure. I would just reflect back on a number of the comments that have been made by the LAO, Department of Finance, representatives from CDE, as well as those that have spoken in public comment. That they've talked about programs that emerged in the last decade from 2000 forward. During that period of time, and that was an important decade for school facilities in California, during that time we had not only the Williams lawsuit, we had the Godinez lawsuit. The allocation board dealt with the Godinez lawsuit, the governor and the legislature dealt with Williams. We had major change in the school facility program, adding programs that did not exist before because there was demonstrated need. And overcrowding was one of them. Another was low-performing schools. Another was the seismic program. The state of California attempted to do and achieved many things that really hadn't been achieved in prior decades. My point is that in order to continue this during this decade and into the next, a new bond program is needed. And I appreciate the fact that the administration has talked about simplifying that. We agree that there are many areas where it can be simplified, but simplification with the recognition that there would be funding through a bond that would be substantial, somewhere in the vicinity of about $10 billion or so, would allow California to continue to deal with the issues that have been, I think, spoken to by everybody in the room today. That California has, and this is an astounding number, and everyone in the U.S. doesn't understand that California is very different than the other states, but we have 10,000 school buildings in 10,000 school sites in California, many more thousands of buildings, and that we have a constitutional requirement to make sure we educate children in California. And we have something called the Field Act that DSA was mentioned earlier. The Field Act requires that schools be the safest places to put people other than hospitals. So funding schools to educate children in safe places is something that we support as an organization, and we believe that having a bond before the public this fall would be important to do. One final comment about that. Every time that we approach a bond year, an even-numbered year, the Cash Organization does polling. The polling that we've done recently, and some of your staff would have learned of this, that polling identified that about 60% of high-propensity voters would support a bond. That's an important comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we had a lot of good discussion. I would like to echo Mr. Dubovne's concerns that, and it was elaborated with some of the public comments, that districts have paid engineers and architects and surveyors to prepare and queue up their plans, and so I am very concerned about transferring these funds when we have plans that have been developed and submitted to DSA. It's my understanding, although I have not studied the school bond, which I fully support, and I'll go on record in supporting the efforts to pass a school facilities bond, that we need to also look at the streamlining process. I mean, if districts are submitting plans and now they're at risk of not getting it funded because it's 5 years outdated because the bureaucracy was not able to process the application, I mean, that's just... It's just absurd and should not be acceptable. But given that that we have the larger needs and we do need to, Mr. Dubovne, I ask that you keep us on task to remind us about this seismic mitigation situation when we revisit this issue after the May revise. But I think we do need to. Be just like the LAO said. I mean, we kind of made a commitment that the monies were going to be here, and we can't just pull the rug out from them and transfer the money over when they submitted the plans. I understand that some of these plans may be outdated, but it seems like there needs to be some, acknowledgement of these concerns. Regarding the emergency repair program, I support the governor's proposal to provide one-time funding for this outstanding legal obligation. But again, we will revisit this issue once we have the updated May revised figures. So that concludes issue 6. I apologize. I did not allow for public comment on issue 5, the state special schools. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address state special schools? Seeing none, this meeting is not adjourned. Issue number 5, we have a vote that needs to add on. Mr. Chavez. Yes, aye. Okay. Seeing no further questions or comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.